So in continuation about talking about my Asian Canadian upbringing and my views on aging, age, getting older, the age hierarchy that was prevalent throughout my childhood. So the first part I talked about a little story when I encountered an elderly man. I tried to help him and he was actually really offended with my actions, my gesture, or something that I thought he would be appreciative of, but I was actually quite disappointed in. And then kind of talking about my birth order, being the youngest and trying to play catch up. And then, of course, just being an old soul, being called an old soul, being called a mature girl, growing up, and how that's kind of like made me think about age as kind of more of a good thing to get older. Now I'm going to talk about the Asian culture and this age hierarchy. So growing up as a Chinese Canadian, I always felt like I was like a living and breathing war with myself, like just this self-battle between the East and the West. And it's like the East and West were inside me, and it's like, which ones do I want to preserve? Who am I? Like, what values do I believe in? I mean, resonate with? What beliefs do I want to own? You know, how do I want to define my identity as a Chinese Canadian? Like, what parts of the Chinese culture do I resonate with? That is who I am. What parts of the Canadian culture, you know? And really, is it a choice? And for a long time, like, I didn't know if it was a choice for me to make. And when you don't feel empowered to make a choice, that's when you feel a lot lost, and you have this loss of identity and this lack of self-awareness, and you kind of just go with the flow with what your teachers tell you, what your parents teach you, what society tells you. And so it's been an ongoing journey to really define who I am. In Asian cultures, age is significantly valued, and it's significantly valued in a hierarchical manner. For example, like in Chinese culture, and this is across all Asia, but I'm going to talk about Chinese culture because I am Chinese. How my family members are referred to, like how I call my family members, really depends on their age and their gender, and whether this person is older or younger than you. For instance, and it determines their formal title. Okay, so it's not just like, for example, I don't call my cousins in Chinese cousins. You call them depending on whether they're older than you and then whether they're female or male. Because cousins can be like, they could be a range, right? It could be a man or woman, like anyone. So if they're female and they're older than me, then I call them 表姐. And if they're female and younger than me, then I call them 表妹. And this is something that we teach our kids too, because like they've got cousins, so they've got 表姐, and they've got a 表哥 as well. So 表哥 is an older male cousin. And then with aunts and uncles, the title really depends on whether they're from my mom's side or my dad's side, and whether they're older than my mom or younger than my mom, or older than my dad and younger than my dad. So it's like really dependent on gender and age. And so it's just a few examples of how age and gender are valued in Asian cultures. And generally, the older someone is, the more respect they're entitled to. And this philosophy is across Asia, like from Korea, Japan, China. It's based on Confucian teachings, so it's spread across all of Asia. So that's kind of the reasons why age is very much valued in those cultures. And in this teaching, in this philosophy of this age hierarchy, basically in Confucian teachings, and I might be butchering some of this stuff because I don't have a degree in Confucian teachings, and I didn't study like this whole thing, but like essentially everyone has a position in life, right? And they're ranked depending on their age. Older is higher than younger, and then gender. Males are higher than females. And how people interact with one another depends on what rank they have in this system, and where they stand in the hierarchy. So like, okay, so the gender part, I'm not gonna go down that route, because like men greater than women, and I think it talks even about like how females exist to serve the male. And like, I mean, when you go to Japan, if you're about to go on a bus, like the men just rush on, and the females are supposed to like, you know, let the man go ahead because they're higher in position than the woman. So I'm not going to go down that route. Okay, so that's just like dropping the gender factor as a feminist. I'm going to drop that over here in this big cloud of crap. Anyway, so kind of that's what the age hierarchy stems from. I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad and I. Okay, so my dad and I are. Have you ever heard the saying same but different? So this age hierarchy was drilled and ingrained in my upbringing into my head, like respect your elders, respect your elders, respect your elders. My dad was the main person who preached it. He was the person who really preached it. And throughout most of his life, he often acted a lot older than his age. And in many ways, I'm similar to him because, as in a previous video, I talked about how I was called a mature girl, which turned into an old soul. So I've always acted a lot older than my age. But his reasons for behaving older is a lot different than my reasons. So it's kind of like we have the same characteristic, but our reasons for this behavior is different. So contrary to him, okay, so I'm going to talk about how I'm different. It's like, I don't just want to survive, okay? So I want to thrive in this life, right? I want the years to be meaningful, not just like another not just another birthday candle. And I believe I have control over my health, and I have control over my future, my destiny. I can choose to be proactive. I can choose to make changes in my life to improve, to extend my lifespan. That death isn't like an outcome, isn't the purpose, isn't the destiny, right? Like death isn't the destiny. Death is not the destiny. And it's rather just an endpoint for a journey. And so I want to optimize the time that I have left on earth, whether it's an hour or days or years or decades, really milking the human experience. But to my dad, okay, so my dad, he views life as an entire struggle. And surviving and getting to the finish line as in, dying at an old age, is the victory. And so in his 30s and 40s, all he focused on was, he wanted to be mortgage free and to be retired, right? That was his kind of, I wanted to do this. This is my purpose in life. Then in his 40s and 50s, he often talked about all the friends and acquaintances he had that had cancer or strokes or heart attacks. And then, so he prepared a will. And then now in his 60s and nearing 70s, he's like thinking about death all the time. And he's like, every time someone he knows dies, he's just crossing the day off another calendar. Like, oh, wow, I'm surviving another day. And because of his upbringing, like growing up during a time where survival was the priority, he values the quantity of life more than the quality of life. And because of that, he feels like he has very little to no control over how his life will play out, like how his health will be. And that death and disease are inevitable, and there's really nothing he can do to prevent it or delay it. It is what it is. Like that's the end. That is the outcome of his life. That's the destiny. And so every year he completes, like every time he celebrates a birthday, he's like, he deserves just slightly more appreciation and recognition for his efforts. And because that's how he treats his elders. Whenever I had family dinners as a kid, I'd have to address each adult or older person than me by their formal titles, by the correct formal title, just like give them a formal title, but like their actual correct one. And you have to do it right when you see them. You like approach, like you get out of your car, you walk into the restaurant, and before you can even sit down, you should have like gone through the list of people at the table by their formal titles before you even sit down. Because if you don't do it immediately, it's considered disrespectful. And so there'd be times when I'd forget, right? I'd just be like, come on, like I'm sitting down, I'm hungry, I just want to eat. And my dad would give me like the side eye, then he would like nudge, then he would just like be blatant about it, like in Cantonese, which means did you address people, did you address so-and-so? And then I'd begrudgingly nod, smile, and then say like, the aunt's title or whatever, or aunt or uncle's titles that were there at the table. And I'd rather say, you know what I'd rather say is, hey, how are you? What's your name? Like, I don't even know what your name is. I just know you by your title. Hey, nice to meet you. You know, hello, it's great seeing you again. How's life, right? And so this age hierarchy often created a social barrier between the old and the young, because if you're in ranks, you're not allowed to, as a younger person, you're not allowed to be candid or be informal with the person who's older than you. And the formality and the expectation always irked me. Like, it just went against my values around building authentic human connections. Because really, it's a social barrier. Like, you know, if you're taught and drilled into your head to respect your elders, do not speak out of turn, do not challenge the elders, you know, don't challenge those who are older than you, do not ask questions about their personal lives, do not, you know, voice an opposing viewpoint, you know, and don't ask questions that undermine an elder's beliefs. You know, just don't ask about their personal lives. Don't ask why something was said or why something was done. Because the bottom line is that with this hierarchy, the elders are knowledgeable and wise. And then the young, you know, the youth are foolish and impulsive. And so that is probably one of the main reasons that Asian children who grow up in a Western society, you know, who have immigrant parents, often have this strained relationship with their parents, with their immigrant parents. I mean, I have an entire book called How to Deal with Asian Parents. And it goes beyond this generation gap. Because how do you get to know one another when you don't feel safe to speak up or speak out? This generational cycle of this age hierarchy of respect your elders, and then the young become the old and expect this respect, then, you know, it just keeps cycling. It started to break down with immigrant parents. And so, like, when my grandparents were children, okay, so my grandparents were children, so their parents, so my great-grandparents, taught them to respect their elders. Right? And they were disciplined when you didn't, and then praised when they did, like guayla, right? Like guay is, and I don't know how to say it, like good, is when they followed the rules of this hierarchy. Then my great-grandparents had children, my grandparents had children, so my parents, and my grandparents taught my parents the same thing, right? Because they were taught by their parents, and when they became old, they're like, well, I lived and breathed this age hierarchy. Now it's my turn, right? My turn to get the respect. And my parents did their due diligence. They you know, gave their parents the respect that they were entitled to. Everyone's just kind of waiting, right? Like, everyone's just like, okay, I'm obviously the older needs my respect, because by the time I'm older, then that's my turn. With immigrant parents, so our parents, when they came and immigrated to a society that doesn't value or really emphasize this age hierarchy, it's not embedded into society, it's not embedded into their culture, nor do they practice Confucian teachings. Like in Canada, you know, like, unless you do your own self-study of Confucian teachings, it's not taught in school, it's not embedded in society, it's not embedded in the workplace, then the beliefs of the younger generation, so my generation, do not align with the older generation. And so what happens is the immigrant parents don't get the respect that they think they've earned, right? They're unable to reap what they've believed they've sown throughout the years of growing up with their parents in Asia, and the respect that they've given their parents. And so then it starts to break off, right? And so the gap between the two generations, like my generation and my parents, it's bigger than the gap between my parents and their parents. Although our generation, like my generation, understands this age hierarchy, we understand that need to respect our elders, and that the elderly are, you know, ingrained in our head, wise, and there's this kind of like this divide between us that we need to respect. We're unable to appreciate it in the way that our great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents and so forth did. This generation who grew up in a Western culture, like, we went to through a school system where questions were encouraged, you know, critical thinking skills were taught, And rewards were given for being creative, and rewards were given for challenging the status quo. The shows and the TV shows and the media that we grew up with, the celebrities and the role models that we looked up to, often talked about, pursuing their passions and having open and honest conversations and living their dreams by being authentic to who they are, and having authentic human connections and having real talk, and then of course pursuing their dreams over getting a job that pays the bills. And so, contrary to what our immigrant parents' generation believed in, it's not about putting your head down, respecting those in higher positions, respecting those who are older than you, and being an obedient worker that paved the way for success. It's about standing out and speaking up, like rubbing shoulders and building relationships with the higher ups, right? With the bosses, the manager, the elders, right? Those who are more wise than you and more knowledgeable than you. So we're supposed to have a good connection with these people so that there are more opportunities that create more success. And it grants you those promotions, the raises, the salary bumps, the bonuses, all these things. And so it's kind of like this divide that we grew up with, contrary to our parents' beliefs. And so I've always believed that respect shouldn't be age dependent. I believe in having manners. I believe in abiding laws and abiding authority, demonstrating social etiquette when you enter someone's home, behaving appropriately and responsibly in public places. I believe in saying thank you, saying please, being polite, helping those who are vulnerable, helping those in need, leaning on one another, not letting a hand when you see a stranger who's struggling, right? It's human nature. I believe in those things, and these beliefs transcend Eastern and Western cultures. But growing up in a Western society has affected my perspective on the age hierarchy, and so this idea that we live in this hierarchy where the older are in a higher rank than the younger, and the men are higher in rank than females, it was something that just never sat right with me. And because it's under assumption that the older the person is, the more life experience that they have, and the more they're entitled to my respect, right? So you're valuing the quantity of years they've existed versus how they actually spent those years. It's like you survived on Earth for 90 years now. You have a right to be held in high regard, doesn't even matter what you did during that life. You could have just been a horrible asshole your whole life, and yet because you're old, you deserve my respect. And that's just not right. Age isn't a determinant for how intelligent, kind, empathetic, talented, wise, and or knowledgeable someone is. Because that's where we shouldn't make assumptions about someone based on their age, based on the number of years they lived on Earth. And we should just give people, whatever age, babies, toddlers, 90-year-olds, 30-year-olds, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, I don't know, Gen X, Y, and Z, just give people the benefit of the doubt and staying impartial until we truly know someone, right? You just because someone who's in their 60s or 70s doesn't mean they're smarter or wiser than someone who's 16, right? We've all met ignorant 70-year-olds, and we all met incredibly wise 17-year-olds. That's kind of my stance on the age hierarchy piece. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about the contradictory beliefs about being old and being perceived old. And so, in the West, if you look at age, it's all about the latest and greatest trends about trends and fads to reverse the aging process, right? Like, celebrities like 50, like, J-Lo is like over 50 and she's amazing, looks amazing for her age, right? For her age, which I love that. Or that celebrity swears by Pilates and yoga and like doing coffee enemas every day and drinking lots of water and sleep and, and you need to do exactly like she does in order to look that great at her age. Or like keto is the miracle diet to cure like everything. Just eat fat and protein all day and you'll live like you'll look like you're in your 20s. Having chia pudding is like, like the miracle food. Or, meditation is what it's at. It keeps the doctors away. You'll feel like you're 10 years younger by meditating every day. And that's, but the latest and greatest trends. And in the East, it's not that different. Like in the East, I think it's all about skincare, right? From Korean face masks to whitening treatments, laser treatments, whitening, everything's about whitening, right? Like white is somehow like equates to beauty. Anti-wrinkle creams and lotions and potions and elixirs and everything and anything you can put on your face that will get rid of wrinkles and get rid of splotchiness, because all you want is fair, blemish-free skin. And it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry in Asia. It dominates. Asians dominate this industry, and it's like dedicated to anti-aging. It's like about helping people discover the fountain of youth and really trying to prevent the inevitable process of aging. And so it's like, and so like if from an Asian's perspective, it's like, respect me if I'm older than you, but don't you dare say I look old. I value being old, but I don't want to show it. And so it's like, it's very much like kind of like contradictory in that belief around being old and being perceived old. It's like wanting to have your cake and eat it too, right? You just can't. And this contradiction mimics how I feel about getting old, myself getting old. So as I've shared with you, like my perspective on age and the age hierarchy, and I don't really believe in it, but then it's also, I feel on a fence when it comes to me getting old and how others perceive me. Like at 34, I'm not even 35 yet. See, I'm like my dad, wanting to always be older than what I really am. I'm either young or I'm not middle-aged yet. And yeah, compared to my 20s, I care a lot less about what others think of me. But like I still do care. And I'm gonna confess here, I do care about what others think of me. Because I still have insecurities. It's like, how do I feel if someone thinks I'm in my 20s? Do I feel good? Like, to be honest, it's a kind of a yes and no. Like, as a mom of two, and I really take pride in prioritizing my health. I practice yoga, I work out, I eat relatively healthy, I have a sensible diet, try to get enough sleep, and avoid the sun, and I have my own skincare routine. And so if someone thinks I'm in my 20s, it's kind of like stroking my ego, like they think I'm younger than my age, and it's quite validating. It validates my efforts, and it just feels nice. But it's like at the same time, on the flip side, with the Asian kind of thing with me, is like, well, I'm not in my 20s though. Like my life stage now is very much different than when I was in my 20s. And I'm much more comfortable in my own skin. And I'm much more confident and positive and have this like positive outlook in life. And I'm much more self-aware. So I would hope that like how I feel reflects how I look, right? It's like like how I look reflects that self-assurance that I've acquired in that decade, right? So it's kind of like on the fence. But do I feel bad when someone thinks I'm in my 40s? Like, yes and no. Because like I'm disappointed that if someone thinks I'm in my 40s, I'm like, well, I obviously am not keeping my appearances up enough, or like I'm prioritizing my health, but it's not showing. And then it also brings to light the insecurities that I have about my own body, about things that I cannot change because of my age, like because I've had 2 kids, or because I'm in my mid-30s. But if someone thinks I'm in my 40s, I'm like, maybe it means like the life experiences and the pearls of wisdom that I've acquired thus far is showing, and they're reflected in the way and how I present myself. So like, it's kind of like this teeter-totter of how I feel about getting old. But bottom line, like, when I'm old, like, back to that story of the man at the grocery store who was offended when I tried to help him. How do I feel when I'm old? Like, I just want to be respected like everyone else. And like, my hopes is that when I get older, I will be even more comfortable with myself, even more self-assured, that, you know, like that advanced age will allow me to care even less about what people think of me. You know, that I won't be offended if someone thinks I'm older or younger, that I wouldn't even care. And that, you know, like, all the insecurities that I have now, like, similar to the amount of insecurities that I had in my teens and my 20s, and now it just starts to dwindle, and then like it'll just eventually fall off the face of the earth, where I'd have absolutely no insecurities by the time I'm like freaking old. And then, like, reflecting on my dad, how we're similar but different, that I hope by the time at my dad's age, in his late 60s, that I won't feel entitled to respect from the younger people, because I will have earned the recognition and the appreciation from them, because I will have many stories of success and failures and adventures and lessons to share, and that my ego will have shriveled up into nothingness. That their respect is great, but it's not going to feed into my ego, because there is no ego to feed. That, like, when I am old, I will not see my death as like, okay, that's my destiny, there's no other way to get around it, let's just get it over with, right? Not to see my death as a doom and gloom, but as a celebration of my life well lived. And so, like, if or when, like, at that time when a younger person comes up to me and offers to help me carry my groceries, I'm hoping I'm going to respond enthusiastically, like, why, yes, thank you, young person. You're very kind. Okay, so how did your upbringing shape the way how you view aging and age, and if you did grow up with that age hierarchy embedded into your brain, how do you fight with it? Or is this something you actually agree with and you live through that, you live and breathe that kind of belief? And how does it shape yourself as you get older? And if you have kids, are you teaching those things to your kids too? Like, if you're someone who is against it, like, how are you teaching them this by, like, and how are you fighting that instinct to want to preserve it? Let me know.